Welcome to Midpoint Designs. In today's tutorial, we're going to learn how to make this beautiful BUBU AGBADA dress. So let's get started. I'm using a doll face satin fabric for this tutorial. So I'm using 3.5 yards of the satin fabric, and you know this fabric is by 60 inches. So you're going to fold it towards the width. Normally, if I'm making front and back dresses together, you fold towards the length first, but we're going to fold towards the width this time around. So the part that is 60 inches, you fold it into two, making it 30 inches. So we're folding towards the width, and then we'll now fold again towards the length. You know, if we fold towards the length first and fold towards the width, we will not get the desired length of the dress that we have. We're working with 62 inches length for this tutorial. So we'll fold towards the width and then fold towards the length to get our 62 inches. So after doing that, we'll now mark our neckline. I'm using 3 inches 3x3 for the front neckline. I'm using 3x3 for the front neckline. After that, I will mark my back neckline, 3 inches by 1.5. I'm marking the front neckline. Then I'll measure the back neckline now, which is 3 inches by 1.5. The 1.5 should be the depth. The width is 3 inches, same with the front neckline. So I will mark that. And after that, I'm going to measure the hip line that I'm using, 24 inches. Then I'll mark my shoulder. This dress doesn't have a shoulder seam, so there will be no cutting at the shoulder. The front and back will be the same. There will be no cutting. So I'm marking a shoulder length of 8 inches. After marking this shoulder length, you know this dress has 2 pleats in front that front the AGBADA. So I'm going to mark 10 inches after the shoulder length. I'm going to pleat twice, 5 inches for each pleat. Then after that, I'll now mark the sleeve length. I'll just use the remaining length of the fabric as my sleeve length. So after that, the next thing I'm going to do is to draw out my hip, my knee, and my desired length measurement. So I'm using a hip measurement of 24 inches. So it depends on the hip length of the person you're sewing for. So my hip length, shoulder to hip, is 24 inches. So after marking that 24 inches, after marking that, I'll mark my knee length. Usually my knee length should be around 38 inches, but I'm going to use a knee length of 42 inches for this tutorial because of the style that we're sewing. So I'm going to mark a knee length of 42 inches. I initially marked 43 there, but I later reduced it to 42 inches. So I'm going to mark the hip line on this other side too, and also the knee length. And then we are using the total length of the fabric as our desired length, which is 62 inches. So by the time we fold in with 2 inches, we'll be left with 60 inches. If you're sewing for a tall person, you can use 4 yards of fabric for this. I use 3.5 yards because I'm sewing it for myself. Normally my full length is 60 inches, so the extra 2 inches is for hemming. So now, having connected the lines, I've connected the lines for the knee line. I'm marking a new knee line there. You know, initially I used 43 inches, then I reduced it to 42 inches. That's where I want my knee line to be. Then I'm marking my hip line here, the horizontal line. After that, I'll mark my hip measurement. My hip circumference is 42 inches, divided by 4 is 10.5. Then I'm adding the extra 10 inches we're using for pleating. I'm adding it here after my hip measurement. Then I also marked 1 inch sewing allowance. So I'm going to transfer the same measurement, the hip measurement, on that knee line. So I marked the same thing I marked on the hip line here, 10.5 plus 10 inches for pleat, and then 1 inch sewing allowance. And I'm going to connect that line straight down to the hem. That measurement is the same thing I'm marking on the hem. So from the knee line, I'm going to connect a straight line to the hem. So from the hip, I'm going to connect a curve to meet the knee line. I'm not using the hip measurement on the hip. I just marked it there so I can transfer the same measurement on the knee line. So I'm just marking from the end of this fabric, from the shoulder line down to the hip line. Then I'll now curve it to that hip measurement, as you can see, just like when you're sewing a cowl dress. I'll curve it from the hip to the knee line, then from the knee line straight down to the hem. Then I'll now cut out my neckline, my front neckline. Now I'll cut it out. Sorry, I'm cutting out. I cut out the back neckline first, not the front. Then I'll cut out my measurement. I'll cut it out, starting from the hemline. Notice the curve from the hip to the knee line, then from the hip line straight to the shoulder line. I didn't cut there. I only stopped cutting at the hip line. And then I'll now come back and cut out my front neckline. Remember to notch the midpoint of this neckline. It's very important. When I'm done, by the time I'm done cutting open the neckline, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open it up and then do a slit on the front neckline. You know, this dress doesn't have a zipper. It's a free dress, so you have to do a slit so you can pass the head. I'm going to come down by 4 inches from the front neckline and open a slit there. Four inches, then open a slit there. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut out my facing. You're going to do a facing around the neckline, both front and back, because there's no shoulder seam. So you're going to cut out one facing for this dress. After pinning the neck down, I'm going to get a leftover fabric and fold it into two and place it at the top side of the neckline. I'm going to place it there and trace out the neckline. The facing I used 18 inches length and then 16 inches width. So the 16 inches I folded into two to form 8 inches, while the length remains 18. So I put it on the neckline and traced out the front and back neckline. After tracing it out, make sure that you also put a slit in front. And at the front neckline, you put the same slit on the facing for the front neckline, and then you will now shape the facing. What I'm doing is just to trace out the neckline first, the facing. After that, I will remove the facing and then put the slit. Okay, so this is the facing. I'll also come down by 4 inches at the front and open the slit there. And then I'll make sure that after the slit, I still have up to 4 or 5 inches down on both sides, both front and back, and shape out my facing. So I'm going to open up this fabric now. I'm going to sew the facing on it. I'm going to open, this is the right side of the fabric, the front of the fabric. So I'm going to place the facing on it. You see the shape of the neckline, the neck and the facing is they are the same. So I'm going to put the facing on it, front facing front, right side facing right side, and then I'm going to pin it down and sew it round. I've sewn it round already, so I'm notching it now before I'll turn it over so it will lay flat. After turning it over, I'm going to iron it flat. I'm going to use a steam iron to iron it flat. So I'm ironing it right now. You can see how neat it looks. Please always do a facing for this type of dress. Don't turn the neckline with a bias, it will not come out neat. Only a facing will make it look neat. So you can decide to hem this facing round. I'm going to use a hemming gum to hem it flat. You can decide to top stitch on it, but hemming gum usually makes it come out neat. You just hem it at the back there. So as you can see me doing, I'm hemming it round. I'm just putting the hemming gum under, and then I'm going to iron it flat so the facing glues to the dress, and then to lay flat. I'm still adding more facing because that initial one wasn't enough. More hemming gum, not facing. So I'm done with that. So after doing that now, I turned it over to the right side. See how neat the neckline is looking. Then I marked the shoulder line, the 8 inches. Remember I notched the center. So for that center, I marked 8 inches on both sides of the dress. I'll mark this 8 inches first before I'll now mark the 10 inches for my pleating. So after marking these 8 inches on both sides of the shoulder line, I now marked 5 inches. Remember we have two pleating, each one is 5 inches rather. So I from that 8 inches, after the 8 inches I'll mark another 5 inches. So from the center line, if you look at the dress, you see the crease line already. When I folded the dress into two, I ironed it, and the crease line is there forming the center line. So I'll mark it straight down from the shoulder line to the hem. I'll mark that 8 inches shoulder measurement. Then after that I'll mark the 5 inches. So I'm marking it straight down to the hem. I'm going to do the same thing for both front and back of this dress on both sides of the shoulder. So you can see me, I'm rolling that line there, the 5 inches that I marked after the shoulder line. The first line is the shoulder line of 8 inches, then the second line is the 5 inches for my first pleat. I'm just taking my time to show you how I marked it. 8 inches first, then after that I marked 5 inches for the first pleat. Remember we took 10 inches allowance for the two pleats that we have on this dress. So I'm doing it for both sides of the dress. So after rolling the lines, you can see the 8 inches mark and the 5 inch. I'm going to pick the midpoint of which is 2.5 inches. Midpoint of the two lines, you know, the line now is 5 inches after the shoulder line. It's 5 inches. So I'll pick the midpoint and fold into two. When I fold it, the two lines will now meet, the 8 inches and the 5 inches, the 8 inches shoulder line and the 5 inches. Remember, it's a 5-inch line that we're folding together now. So the midpoint is 2.5, as you can see me measuring. I'll get the midpoint, fold it into two, and then I'm going to iron it flat before I'll stitch on that line. This total folding is 5 inches from that end point on the shoulder line to that 5 inch. That's what we folded. So we picked it from the midpoint, which is 2.5 inches, and we folded it, and then I'm going to sew straight on that straight line that you see, the chalk line that you're seeing there. I've sewn it. See how it looks? See how it looks? Beautiful. So after this, we're going to do for the other both sides of the dress. After sewing it, the next thing is to mark the second pleat. You know, the second pleat is also 5 inches. So the best way to do it is open up this slit and mark 2.5 inches, which marks the end of this pleat. And if you look at the dress very well, the second pleat started immediately after the first pleat. So to make it look the same, you mark after this first pleat, you mark 5 inches. So what I'm doing right now is to mark 2.5 inches from that stitch line. The 2.5 inches is where the pleating ends. Then after that 2.5, I will now mark another 2.5 inches where I will pick as the midpoint of the second pleat. I don't know if you understand this well. Or you can as well just mark 5 inches from the end of this first pleat and then get the midpoint and pick from that midpoint to fold it into two. I think that should be easier. So I'm ruling that 2.5 inch, the first point where the first pleat ended. Then I'll mark another 2.5 inch, which is like the midpoint of the second pleat now. You know where the first stitch ended, you're supposed to mark another 5 inches there. So after marking that, I'm still marking it. I'm going to pick the midpoint after marking. Make sure you mark on both sides. So when you're marking, please note, this is very important. That knee line, the reason why I came down below my knee length is to ensure that this second pleat gets to that below my knee length. So but we are going to sew, you will not sew it unlike the first pleat that you sewed down to the hem, from shoulder down to the hem. This second pleat will stop at that knee line where you have that curve from your hip measurement to your knee. That's where you're going to end the stitching of the second pleat. And then you cannot just end the stitching abruptly like that. You have to make sure that you sew it off just the same way you sew that, so that it will not have gaping there. So what you do, that 2.5 inch you're going to fold to sew. When you get to that end, that knee line, you reduce it. Instead of using 2.5, you can reduce it. Maybe you go up from that knee line by like 12 inches like I did. That's what I did. Then you start reducing the 2.5 to 2 inches. As you're coming down gradually, from 2 inches, you can reduce it to 1.5 inches. From there to 1 inch until you get to the end, ½ inch. So the same way, like the way we sew that on dress, you just sew it out from that ½ inch up to continue to where you started coming, reducing the measurement until you get to the normal 2.5 inch. So I've sewn it. Look at how that place looks neat. So you won't have any gap in there. You see where I sewed off that place. So you do the same thing on both sides of the dress, both for front and the back. That's what you do. At the end of the day, by the time you finish sewing the two pleats, you measure it like I'm doing here. You see that each pleat is 2.5 inches and both of them have 5 inches. By the time you take your 10 inches out, you see that you've already sewn it. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to neatly hem my facing. If you can decide to fold your facing before turning it with to the neckline, but I did not fold that. So I'm going to use a lace. I'm going to use a small lacing to neatly hem this facing. That's what I'm doing there. You can see how neat it is, because by the time you open the front, you're going to see it there. So I'm using that lace patches, a little pieces of lace patches, to neatly hem the facing. So by the time you open the front of the dress, you'll be seeing that back facing there. It will not be looking rough. So I cut out this patch, this Ankara patch, like a heart shape, or you can call it love shape. I'm going to use to design the front of this dress. I also cut out the lace patches, the small lace patches. I used glue to glue it. So if you have a zigzag stitch, you can use the zigzag to neatly hem this Ankara patch, but I don't have a zigzag stitch, so I use a lace patch. So after gumming it together with my UHU gum, I now stitched it on the dress. So I'm just taking my time to sew it round. I pinned it first of all, this heart-shaped Ankara patch on the place where I want to sew it, and then I'm stitching it round, following the shape of the Ankara patches. You can call it Ankara cutout, whatever. So I'm just stitching it round. So after stitching it, this is how it looks. So beautiful. So if you turn it out on the wrong side, you see the shape of that heart shape there. The stitching, you can see the shape there. So beautiful. And then after adding this, now the next thing I'm going to do is to turn to the wrong side of the fabric and shape it down. So if you look at that dress very well, you see that the sleeve looks like another pleat, like the dress looking like it has 3 pleats on it. So to get that same shape there, I'm going to come down for my sleeve opening by 14 inches on both sides. So I'm going to fold in this sleeve by 2 inches. So it will look like, the pleating is 2.5, the 2 pleats we have 2.5 each. So by the time I fold in this sleeve by 2 inches and stitch it, it will look like another pleat there. So this sleeve opening, I'm going to fold it, and then for shaping the dress, I'm also going to shape the dress with 2 inches. Even though that's why I left extra 1 inch sewing allowance for this dress. The dress is already a free dress, so by the time we use another extra 1 inch to sew it, we'll still have enough allowance to wear the dress. So I'm using 2 inches to shape this dress. And then the dress has a slit. If you look at it, it has a slit. So from the hem, I came up by 16 inches for the hem, from the hem to form my slit, the slit opening. Now I'm going to hem it, fold the hem by 2 inches, so I will be left with 14 inches slit by the time we're done sewing this dress. So that's what I'm doing to mark the slit opening. So once I mark the slit opening, I will go and hem the sleeve, and then I'll shape the sides and also sew off the slit, and then we are done. So I'm just taking my time to pin the sides well before shaping it. I'll fold in the slit and sew. You see the end result of the dress is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. If you look at the slits, it looks like there are 3 slits there right now, and then the pleating looks like there are 3 pleating, and then the slit down. The dress is And this is the final look of the dress. If you want to learn how to make this Zara cap on my head, check the description box below. Thank you for watching my video. Bye.